Welcome to Cybermania, Cyber Talks with the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Discussing risks, AI, emerging threats, workforce challenges, and more. Brought to you by Cyber Range Solutions. With your host, May Brooks.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Cybermania. And today we have a special guest. We have Chip Harris, who will introduce himself in a second, but I want to clarify that this is not a regular episode. This episode is actually recorded a week after the original episode was recorded, a few days after, because 4 days ago, a war started in Israel. And being an Israeli myself, and Chip has been in the region for a long time, and he'll tell you all about it in a minute, I didn't feel right just releasing the original episode without addressing the atrocities that happened around Gaza, around in Israel, in the Israeli kibbutzim, in the Israeli villages. So I did want to add this preface to our original chapter. So without further ado, hi Chip, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing today?
Not great, heartbroken if I'm being very honest. But tell us a little bit about yourself, like a short background.
Well, as I told people in my elevator little speech, is that my name is Lucas Chip Harris. I am a senior cybersecurity administrator dealing with IT and OT systems. So I deal with IT, which is your traditional based IT, as well as OT, which is your operational technology. So I'm also a certified ethical hacker, pen tester, forensic investigator, and auditor. I did 18 years as a private military contractor. So I have been, stationed in 7 states, 22 different countries over the better part of 18 to almost 20 years, of my career dealing with cybersecurity. That started basically after September the 11th, the same thing that basically that you have seen that's been declared happening in Israel. I worked with the IDF, I've worked with the Mossad, I've worked with the Shabbat, I've worked with Unit 8200 before in the past. And watching the news, it is very heartbreaking. I have now officially lost 4 friends due to this, as well as we still have one that is missing at this time that we're still trying to locate. So it has been very, very disturbing. It's been very heartbreaking to actually watch these things happen to a country that I consider to be my second home.
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you for that. And I'm sorry for your loss. I don't think there's an Israeli family who hasn't lost someone. It could be a family friend, family member, neighbor, someone. Even in my small village up north in Israel, we've lost a friend, a neighbor. We lost him. He went to a party and never came back, which is absolutely heartbreaking. And my heart goes out to his family and his close friends. Really, it's heartbreaking all around. And I want to take a minute to take this back to cybersecurity, and I want to ask you your opinion. I know my opinion, but I want to ask you. There's a lot of chatter around the networks saying that this couldn't have happened without cyber being involved, and absolutely everything started with a cyber attack, taking down surveillance, taking down infrastructure, etc., in the Israeli side, coming from Gaza to the Israeli side. And I want to ask you, not specifically on this event, but in general. First of all, do you think cybersecurity was involved, the cyber attack was involved? And secondly, is that actually a scenario that we see that we should be afraid of?
Yes, for example, is that one of the things I deal with in OT technology, and for those that don't know, operational technology is what I call the world underneath the world. It is your lights, your gas, your water, it is your infrastructure, and it's the infrastructure that's involved. And cyber is definitely involved with a lot of that because a lot of these things are on the internet. A lot of these things are being controlled and maintained by vendor-based software that's proprietary, but it's also very one-off and very old. Normally about 30 years old is the average infrastructure that you know that you're dealing with. Well, in computer terms, yes, these things are very open and can be attacked because their security protocols, weren't baked into them when they were being created. So it is very easy, if you know what you're doing and know how these systems work, which are very proprietary, they're very Doric, and they're very old, to be able to get into a power grid, to get into a water treatment facility, to get into, and these things, didn't have two-factor authentication. They didn't have secure sockets layer built into them. They're very small SCADA-based systems. They're very, what I call dummy dump controllers, like a terminal. These things were not really meant to have security baked into them. And guess what? Those are very easy, soft targets for a nation state to be able to infiltrate. So yes, turning off the water, the power, the lights, is one of the first parts of a major cyber attack, as well as the, misinformation and disinformation campaigns that can be run through social media, which is a very easy, light, low-end, cheap cyber attack is a misinformation. And then you have your counterintelligence and your counter surveillance, that can be, taken upon on many different avenues from a tradecraft standpoint of view, all the way to using all of your nation states or cyber abilities to knock systems offline, wipe systems completely, cause cyber chaos and cyber attack to attack that company's not only information and data, but also to attack their infrastructure.
Yeah. So I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. I know these scenarios. Hell, we've seen, according to the media, that Israel slash the US has been able to attack a nuclear facility in Iran. So it's not something that is impossible. The question is, in this scenario, was it involved? And I don't know the answer. I have to say, I don't know the answer. I have my own suspicions, but I don't know the answer. Will it explain it?
In a sense, yes. In a sense, no. And first off, that's way above my pay grade, as I tell
Yeah.
people, and it is suspicious. It is, how can a terrorist organization, which that's what they are, that Hamas is a terrorist organization, they're not a political real affiliation, no matter what they say. They are sponsored by a nation state. I'm not going to say whom, but they are sponsored by some very bad people that want to do very bad harm to Israel. Now, Israel doesn't live in the greatest neighborhood. They don't have really nice neighbors that like them that much. So as I've explained before, is that, if you've got that kind of strategic attack done by land, sea, and air, that is a coordinated attack that just doesn't happen within 24 hours. In theory, this took a year's worth of planning, to be able to do these kinds of attacks. And the barbaric attacks that actually happened caused, that shock and awe kind of thing to happen. So, what can we have done proactively versus what we're doing now reactively are some things that we have to actually take a look at, and that is just no different than we would do a tabletop exercise in cybersecurity. It's no different than what we do from a red team to a blue team to a report that goes to the purple team, in the cyber world. It is a learning moment, and then you've got to sit down and address the facts of the three major things. The first one is what happened. Okay,
Yeah.
what was the line of communication and what was the intelligence that was dropped. Okay, two, what was taken. Life, life was taken. Possibly data was taken, intelligence was taken. We know human life was, one of the first things that they did for the shock and awe. And then on top of that, though, too, is was there data infiltration done at the same time? Was there a tax launched at the same time? And then the other thing, though, too, is the last one is the resolve. What are we going to do to resolve the situation What are we going to do to, have we call lessons learned, in the IT world and in the OT world? How can we enact that in the physical world? So those things really have to be kind of be addressed as the first three things we have to look at, when we're dealing with a situation like this. And it's a horrible situation. No country, no peoples, no populace, uh, ever expect something like this. And we have seen this in the United States. With September the 11th, there was uh, it was a category of things that just rolled downhill to where one intelligence community didn't speak to the other one, and then this led to this, and and it was basically a comedy of errors, to where if there was good, clear lines of communication, we could have seen some kind of prevention or some kind of stopgap that could have stopped us from happening. Now, that's history, right? That's stuff that we've learned from our past. How do we apply that to our future so something doesn't happen like that again? Laws got passed, communication between different groups started to happening. There was a lot more information sharing. There were lines of communication that were set up in case of crisis. So we have seen these things develop in the United States over 20 something plus years, and it takes time, because it's not just something that happens immediately overnight. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, for example, after September 11th, there were 20 to 30 different data streams that were coming in, from everything from voice communications to telecommunications, from recording to, all these. There was no clear line of communication. Okay? And there was no information sharing between what was happening between the police department, between the fire department, between the port authority, between the federal government, and the army, and there was in the FAA, there were tons of different ways that they were communicating on different channels and so forth. Well, finally, that all became a streamlined communication over time. Okay, same thing we see in the IT business practices. The server group doesn't talk to the networking group, that doesn't talk to telecom, that doesn't talk to the C level, and we have to streamline that communication to where everybody's on the same page. So that is something that we're going to see probably develop out of this horrific attack and this horrific, accident, acts of war and violence, is that there will be probably within the future, and this is my prediction, better communications between the different parts of the intelligence community and the physical ground, I call it ground pounders, you know, a better way of doing a counter surveillance, counter intelligence collection and disseminating that information. And then collective databases that will eventually be shared, like we've seen in the US, between those different agencies.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I really do. I think you took this the attack and you compared it to a tabletop exercise, and I think that in this situation, I definitely see parallels here. But I think that right now we're sort of writing the playbook, because there was never an attack that killed immediately over 1,200 people, plus had 150 hostages, prisoners of war, in a very limited part of the world, in a very with loads of civilian population around it, which I know the Israeli. I've been in the IDF. I've served the IDF. I know that they don't want to have collateral damage. There will be collateral damage. There's always collateral damage, especially when you
Absolutely.
hide, especially when you hide behind women, children, elderly. I mean, that's collateral damage that no one wants, but it will happen. And I think that right now we really are writing the playbook, because this has never happened before. Even if I compare it to September 11, which was absolutely horrific, it was in the US, and then the people in the US, except of course for all the victims, which is to this day it is unfathomable. There was no kidnaps outside the US where you have to go into civilian population. I mean, it's unprecedented. And if I take it to the cyber world, I think there's definitely a lot to learn from it. Whether there was or there wasn't a cyber attack involved, it doesn't really matter
Correct.
whether there was disinformation campaigns going on around the same time, which that is something that I think there was. I see evidence that there was some sort of misinformation, not just in not just within cyber. We already know that there was a lot of misinformation around this attack, um, planned for a long time. So I think that we really should learn from it. Not just Israel, by the way. I think that this. I remember September 11, and I remember the first I heard of it. My mom called me and told me a plane just crashed into the World Trade Center, and my reaction was, "What movie are you watching?" It sounded like a joke. I mean, that was no. And then the second one, I actually saw that already. I was already watching the news, and I remember thinking to myself, "This is a piece of history. I'm seeing history in the making in the worst possible way because it was unimaginable. I don't think anyone could have imagined 9/11, and I don't think
And
anyone could have imagined this."
as I tell people, since we are a very, at that time, we're the internet was still, in its greater part of its infancy. It was the first televised attack
Yeah.
that we had ever seen. I mean, it was happening in real time. I mean, I know where I was, what I was doing, what was going on. I mean, I was glued to the television, and everybody was watching this in real time across the world.
Yeah.
And, it's the same thing is that, we're watching these attacks happen in real time across the world, and it's, as I told people before, this is how we communicate now. We have beyond just what we had in television now. We have bukus of ways that we can now communicate from internet to satellite communications to, I mean, you name it, traditional media versus non traditional media. And it is sad that we are watching this in real time happening. And, it is one of those things where the shock and the awe when it actually does hit you, and you sit down and you really think about it for a second, it's like, wow, this is really, really bad. And it's really happening in real time. And for the first time ever, it's not just something over there. It's something that I can actually physically watch on my phone, that now is in my hand versus what I used to have to pick up and listen to, over, from a traditional landline versus what you can, now hold into the palm of your hand and communicate with. You can watch it on the internet. I mean, there's so many different lines of communication now that are actually out there based on, over traditional print. Because, when we used to hear about these things back in the day, was it would be in the newspaper and it would just be something you read. It was
And it
not
wouldn't be
something,
a day old, and you could avoid it if
yeah,
you wanted to protect your kids, for example, which is something I'm very concerned with as a person dealing with security awareness. I'm very concerned with children all over the world being exposed to things that
right,
no adult should ever see, not to mention children. And
right,
we can't stop it. It's on
yeah,
TikTok, it's on Facebook, it's on Instagram, it's on Telegram, it's on WhatsApp. And I know I work with people that are dealing directly with Google and with Meta and with all the rest, and TikTok as well. And they're trying to take off things, but that's already after effect.
yes,
So we can't
it's
shield our children as well.
right. It is, and this is where you have to step in for the parental use of your digital lifestyle, based around your children. What content can and can't be seen, by your child, and what you want them to ingest. Because just because they're not seeing it at home doesn't mean they can't see it on a friend's phone. Doesn't mean they can't see it
Exactly.
somewhere else. I mean, it's the, it's this is something that you used to be able to avoid Time and Newsweek and your traditional paper and whatnot. And it was a day old and it happened over there. It didn't happen to us. Well, guess what? Now, since we have every line of communication in the world that's open, guess what? Now everyone is exposed almost in real time, when we see these things, when these things happen. So, and we have seen this, and we have seen stuff like this before, in the history of Israel, but it wasn't as coordinated, it wasn't as fast, and it wasn't as logistically planned out that happened all within the same real time span of 2 to 3 hours. This is totally new, to us that deal with this in the cyber world, because normally you can see the breadcrumbs, that have been left, that are leading you to a cyber attack. And now the cyber attacks and some of the stuff that we see that the nation states do, like China, Russia, India, some of the BRICS nations, some of the and some of the what I call Kazakhstan, the Stan countries, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, their attacks are very quick. They're very easy. They're very from all the way from low hanging fruit, all the way to top tier attacks. But guess what? They're trying every single avenue they could to be able to do this, and then we can learn from those, attacks that actually happened. This was so sudden, so fast, so quick that there was no way to literally scramble units together to be able to stop the attack from happening.
Yeah.
So, and the systems that were set up in play, they subverted. That's
Yes.
one of the key things that you have to learn is that you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You got to diversify. You got to have full. When they say, "Oh, the surface attacks," well, how big is the surface? That's the first question I asked the company. They said, when your cyber attack happened, what did they get? What did they steal? What did they infiltrate? What did they take away? Well, okay, it was this one part of the business. Okay, in your surface that you talk about, or your data pool, or your data lake, whatever buzzword you want to use, you have a surface area, you have a barrier, then you have a DMZ, you have the firewalls, all the stuff that's in between there. How did they get through? Okay, well, they got through this old protocol, blah, blah, blah. Was that not part of your surface area that you didn't look at as part of your attack? If you knew it was an older system or something that was not patched or something like that, did you not alert the people that were out there within the different teams? Hey, this is a vulnerable system and these are the reasons why. No, we didn't do that. Well, that's your first problem is you didn't tell your networking team, your server team, your firewall team, your security team, your DevOps team. You didn't tell everybody that, hey, there's this gaping hole over here in our surface to where they might be able to penetrate through to punch through the firewalls and all this different stuff by using these old protocols that still exist on this one system. Okay, well, congratulations. You've now set yourself up for failure in an audit because, if you're state, federal regulated here in the United States, if you do have a cyber attack, there are certain laws and stuff that's actually set up to where you have to be able to report these things, especially if you're a publicly traded company and not a private company, to shareholders and so forth, and then the money gets involved. And guess what? If you have a full-blown cyber attack, it is guaranteed that if your company is on the NASDAQ or on, the Wall Street or anything like that, your revenue the day the attack is mentioned, guess what? Your stock drops 22%. Guaranteed, guaranteed, flat. That's with no questions asked. If it drops below that, then you really got a big problem. But normally at the opening bell, your company is going to lose 22% of its stock holdings. That's money. And that's a green paper problem that you probably could have addressed in your infrastructure budget as well as your cybersecurity budget, or however you want to determine that you didn't protect that golden goose egg that was over there because you took all of your eggs and put it in one basket and you didn't give the monies for your CS budget to the different departments that needed it instead of piling it all into one tool or one program or one falsified hope that a vendor sold you because that was the best solution at the time to protect your surface, as I tell people. And it's ridiculous.
There's no one solution,
That's right. And now it turns into a learning moment because you got your teeth kicked in, you lost a bunch of money on the stock market. Now you got a sea level that's coming down and breathing down everybody's neck. And the first question I'm going to ask is, how did it happen? Okay. And there you go. So this is where we are now in the same conflict is what was happening in these situations that caused these things to fail, that caused these things to fall through the cracks. So, it is a learning moment. There will be a lot of lessons learned taken out of this, conflict. And the other thing though too is, will this spread just like a virus spreads through the network? Will this conflict spread out to other countries, and will other people get involved? So that is yet to be foreseen. I am not going to stipulate or even give a summation of what could actually happen in the future, about that. Hopefully, it will not. But this is war, and in war they have casualties, and war is never pretty. People die on both sides. Hopefully, it won't be like a long, drawn out conflict that happens for years and years and years and years and years and years, like we have seen in the United States, which we have just gotten out of almost a 22-year war.
Yeah.
That most people that are younger were either born into or forgot about.
Yeah.
So it will be very trying times, very interesting times, and it will also be something that we will have to be able to endure. The Israeli people are very, very adept to enduring very traumatic things and very horrible things that's happened, in Judaic past. So hopefully, this will end and end quickly, and hopefully peacefully.
I I completely hope so. I join your hopes. I will finish this off with referencing what President Biden said yesterday about his conversation with Golda Meir back in 1973. She told him that the Israeli people have one secret weapon. We have nowhere else to go. So we will prevail. There is no doubt about it in my mind. We will prevail because we don't have a choice.
Right.
Um, I think there will be a lot of lessons learned here from all sides, from anyone involved, everyone even watching this, even people from the cybersecurity community who have just listened to what you said about the attack surface. For me, it really resonated with thinking about defense in depth, something that we've been talking about for 30 years,
Right.
probably. You can't
We
just have
can't.
one solution, even if it's the best solution in the world, it's only
That's
going to
right.
solve
You
one
know,
thing.
I tell
Yeah.
people, I'm like, for 30 years, we have fought password issues. We still don't even have that fixed. So if
Yes.
you think pouring all of your monies into one program to solve it all, it's not going to work that way. You've got to diversify your portfolio just like you do your finances. You've got to spread it out across all the different teams, across the whole surface area, not just one single niche part that you're trying to invest in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Chip, thank you so much for joining me again for this fascinating conversation. I mean, I love talking to you. I wasn't expecting to do it so quickly and for these reasons, but I think it was a great conversation. And I really want to thank you for joining me today, for your support. And for all those listening to us, check out our next episode, which will be hopefully the original episode that we recorded that is absolutely fascinating. And thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so very much. You have a wonderful day today.
Thank you.